just going to scan the room. Like, is good? Is someone say mid? That's awesome. Good, okay, so we're doing okay. We're holding together, at least, yeah. Good. Well, guys, it's Christmas time. I'm so excited. I love Christmas. Thanksgiving is great. It is great. But Christmas is better. You get it. So tonight, we are going to be talking about Advent. How many of you grew up knowing what Advent was, or maybe even like observing Advent in your household? Yeah? Okay. Good mix. I did not know what Advent was until probably 3 or 4 years ago. So I've been on a learning curve. But it's been really fun to learn about something new in my faith. Advent means coming. If you like this kind of stuff and you're a nerd like me, it comes from the word Adventus in Latin. And Advent starts, so it started yesterday. It starts the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Also, if I say anything wrong about Advent and someone else knows more than me, feel free to correct me. I'm still learning literally each year, but I'm bringing to the table what I have learned, what I think is interesting about it. And so Advent begins the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and it runs through Christmas. You might have seen like an Advent wreath. It'll have like 3 purple candles and a pink candle on it, and you'll light one of the candles each Sunday. I've heard people say each candle has a different meaning as well, kind of a different focus for the week. But the concept is essentially remembering the fulfillment of the promise of the coming Messiah. So, if you didn't know this, Christmas has not always been a thing. So Christmas comes from the birth of Jesus and the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies that the Lord promised He would send a Messiah, He would send a King. So people waited hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years to see these prophecies and these promises come true. So Advent is an observance of remembering the prophecies, the fulfillment of God's promise, and also as we hold that as something that has happened, we wait for Jesus' return. And so it's like this waiting encourages us in our active waiting for Him coming back. Yes, okay. I would say this season is pretty easy to kind of like blaze through. Christmas season is very busy. A lot of parties, a lot of activities, Christmas lights, Christmas movies, Christmas everything. And as someone that loves Christmas, it's really easy for me to get consumed and go from one thing to another and kind of miss the deeper meaning and the potential behind the season of Advent specifically. I think also, or I'll say this, when I was preparing, I was trying to think, okay, and now I have this understanding of what Advent is. What do I do with that? How can I be intentional to fight against the rush and the busy? And I was thinking too about how self-centered I can get this time of year. It's like, okay, what do I want for Christmas? How do I want to spend my Christmas break? What do I want Christmas Day to look like? All these sorts of things that are pretty self-centered. And so I think something that's crucial to our faith is that we push back against that self-centeredness, right? So when we're walking with Jesus, it's no longer I'm not living my life for myself, I'm living my life for Christ. And so I think even in that way, we can look at this time of year as an opportunity to learn how to push up against our flesh in that way and to set our eyes on Christ and not on ourselves. So this is not an all-encompassing list, But I would say there's three things that stick out to me about ways that we can be intentional with Advent and things that I've learned about Advent. The first, I'll go ahead and give you the three because they're literally up there. It's remembrance, celebration, and waiting. Now, remembrance, I've kind of already touched on that, is remembering the Old Testament prophecies, the fulfillment of those promises that God made. Reflecting on also Jesus' humble entry into the world. Like, he could have come however he wanted, on chariots with a whole army, like, could have come crazy. And instead, he comes in the most vulnerable way than a baby. Like, babies can't do anything for themselves, you know? This is a very vulnerable way to enter the world that you've created when you have power over all. So remembering that about Jesus and what that says about his character, what that says about who God is. And also it's a time, I think, to remember, because we're so forgetful. I even appreciate that we have these yearly rhythms, and even the weekly rhythm of like going to church to remind us of the truth, to remind us, hey, this isn't all about you. Lots of reminders that come from that are really helpful for me, at least. And I think when we look at the history of humanity, we're just forgetful. And so it's helpful to have things to remind us of what's true. The second, of course, is celebration. Do we have any fellow Christmas lovers in the room? Anybody? Yeah. Okay, good. Tony with a passionate yes. I love it. This is a side note, but Tony, I think in high school, was it? He bought this like ginormous blow-up Santa and he put it in his yard without telling his parents. It's awesome, and those parents gave it away. That's so sad. I know, we need to all pitch in and get Tony a giant Santa for his front yard. But that's a great picture of celebration, of Tony embracing the season and just giving himself fully to the season in front of him. But for us in Advent, it's easy to, let me walk that back. So with Lent, leading up to Easter, there's a lot of people will fast something. Kind of in contrast with Advent, I think it's a call to feast, a call to celebrate, where people fast from things because the Lord gave his life, like they give up something, that in this season we get to celebrate. It's actually like a literal spiritual discipline, a celebration, is enjoying. We see in the Old Testament there were these festivals that they would have throughout the year that they were called to celebrate. And so literally the Lord is inviting us to also enjoy. I think another thing to note about celebration is just as, like, I'm going to celebrate Maddie's achievements, her birthday, those sorts of things, because we have a relationship, we can do that with the Lord. He invites us into that as we have relationship and communion with him. And so if he's done something awesome, like send Jesus to the earth, then why wouldn't we embrace the opportunity to celebrate that and to do it even in a lighthearted way? And the third, so we have remembrance, which is past. We have celebration, which is present. And then we have waiting, which is future. The waiting portion is this wow, that's a hard word to say. Anticipation. There we go, we got it. Thanks, Parker. Of Christ's second coming, of him returning, and all that brings. That the lame would walk, that people would be healed of sickness, that all evil and death would cease. I mean, that's something to anticipate, big time. And something we forget that's even going to happen, because it doesn't, to me it doesn't sometimes feel real. It's like, that's actually going to happen? That's crazy. I think also the waiting of this season can speak to are to the Lord's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises. So all of you likely are waiting on something. If nothing else, you're waiting to finish your degree, or you're waiting for the semester to be over. And so learning from, as we remember, seeing the Lord promise this thing, and eventually, even though it's hundreds of years, eventually he came through on his promise. And it was better than they were even expecting. Because they were expecting Jesus to be a literal king, like on earth. They didn't know he was going to bring salvation to all people. And so as you wait also for, maybe for our upperclassmen, our seniors in the room, as you wait for a job, as you wait for your next season, as you wait to figure out what major you're going to have or what you're going to do this summer, or maybe as you're waiting for a family member to get healed from a sickness, or a friend to come to know Christ, or your crush to also have a crush on you. Like, as you're waiting on these things, it's a great time to remember how the Lord shows up in our waiting. A few weeks ago, Tate did a 2-week series on waiting at Wesley. And he said 2 things that I think, everything he said was great. I took so many notes. But these things particularly stuck out to me. He said, my perspective impacts the way I wait. And I think that's a great way. Something that waiting now in Advent does for us is it gives us a grander perspective of, okay, the Lord's not just like been moving since the 2000s. Like, the Lord's like existed in all of time. And so as I'm waiting for this small thing, even reflecting on, you're in your first year of college, you're like already ready to graduate. That when you look back in the Old Testament, these people waited hundreds of years. And I don't know, when I compare something I'm waiting for in a few years to that, I'm like, whew, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord, I don't have to wait 150 years. So does that make sense? It adds that kind of perspective, that bigger picture, instead of it just being about me and my perspective in my life and everything being centered around me. It's like, man, I get to be part of this grand arc of the story that the Lord is writing. And even it helps me to be more present in the small and everyday, and seeing more purpose in that. The other thing he said about waiting was this. Everything we're personally waiting for pales in comparison to God. And I think that ties right in with having that greater perspective in our waiting. That even if there's something that you're waiting for that feels really important to you, that the Lord is still more important than that thing. And so having your eyes fixed on him while you're waiting for something that can be very good and a gift is super important. So we want to remember what the Lord has done in the past. We want to celebrate in the present. And we want to wait with anticipation, with hope, with expectancy for the future. For Jesus is coming, but also what that can teach us in just our waiting in our own little stories. But if there's anything I want you to take from tonight, it's this. I think with any spiritual practice, any sacred rhythm, anything like that, I just blinked. Give me 1 second. Yes. That kind of it can be intimidating, those sorts of things of like, oh my gosh, okay, Miranda, 3 weeks ago you told me I need to pray more, and then I need to evangelize, and now you're adding that I need to observe Advent, and what is all of this? But I don't want you to have that perspective of it. A perspective that's helped me is that when you get to the pearly gates, I'll see you there. When you get there, Jesus is not, well, hopefully. There's been lightning coming down. When you get there, the Lord is not going to be like, you know what, Jason? You didn't observe Advent. So, sorry. That's not how it's going to go. But here's something that is striking for me that I think I heard someone say a few years ago. This really resonated with me. It won't make a difference in your eternity, but think about the invitation that comes through Advent, the invitation that comes through prayer, that comes through silence, that comes through studying the Word, that comes through worship. All of these sorts of things. It's simply an invitation to know God more. And so I think there's an invitation in Advent for you simply to know God more, to know His character more, to know His Word more. And so when you get to the pearly gates, that you recognize Him more than you would had you maybe missed an opportunity just to get to know Him a little bit more each year. Like, it's not like an overwhelming amount, but it's those small increments over time that make a huge difference. And also, it's not like, I was listening to my girl Annie Downs. If you got any Annie Downs fans in the room? Oh yeah, she's awesome. Fun fact, she spoke in here when I was a sophomore. Yeah, no big deal. Her and Tate went to high school together, or not high school, college. So he knows her personally. Yeah, I'm trying to get the door on that bell, but here we go. Maybe she'll see this. Hey, Annie. But I was listening to her podcast, and she was talking about how you're going to celebrate Christmas anyway, right? Like, it's not like you're no Christmas or Christmas and observing Advent for 20 however many days. You're celebrating it anyway, so you're literally adding this just tiny blip to your Christmas experience that you could form a whole habit from now to Christmas. That you can invest and just be like, Lord, I just want to know you more. And for Him to show up for you in that. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, how in the world do I do that? Well, I'm your practical girl, so I made a list for you of some suggestions. This is not an all-inclusive list, but just some ideas of ways that you can be intentional in this Advent season. One, you could read a whole gospel. John has 21 chapters. You can even take Sundays off from now until Christmas, and you can read the whole thing. And maybe a few wiggle days in there in between. So you could do that, and by the end of this year, you could have read a whole gospel. And kind of even get a larger perspective of Jesus' life beyond just what the significance of His birth. Or maybe we go the opposite direction. We want to study the Word a little bit. You can look at Matthew 1 and 2 and Luke 1 and 2. And you can slowly read through those passages over the next 4 weeks. Or you can read them over and over again every day. You could really dive in deep depending on kind of your experience with the Word. Maybe you're a little bit of a nerd like me and you want to really go digging in the details. You could look at the word meanings and the significance of different parts of the story. So you could dive in that way. The past few years, have been signed up to do, there's a girl, her name's Hannah Brencher. She's an author, she's a super awesome believer, and she does an Advent email list every year. So the past 3 or 4 years I've done it. And it's completely free. You get an email in your inbox every morning. And she kind of walks you through different perspectives of different things. There's historical information. There's her perspective on things, her own personal insertions from her life. But it's really helpful even to just have that 5-minute email to read every day to kind of just recenter me if I'm getting caught up in the busy. And to learn along the way as well, things I didn't know before. And I can put that link somewhere so you can access it if you're interested. You can set an alarm each day and just pray for something that you're waiting for. Or pray for your heart posture in this season. Maybe pray for a relationship that needs some reconciliation. This is something recently I learned about, you could just let the anticipation build. This lady Annie was talking about how her family observes Advent is, and this is from my experience with Advent, pretty intense. So don't feel the pressure to do this. But the first week of Advent, they put up a Christmas tree. Nothing else. Just the tree is there for a whole week. Then the next week, they put the lights on. Then the next week, they put the ornaments on it. The last week, they enjoy the tree. And it's kind of this concept of matching as your anticipation grows toward Christmas, kind of matching the way you celebrate with that. I don't know. It's not for everyone, but I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Or you could do something completely different. Those are just some suggestions of ways that you can, in small ways or big ways, just be present to the season. So you don't rush through it, and the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, it's New Year's. Where did December go? Because that's kind of how I feel about November and October. I don't know about you guys. So I'm trying to slow roll. Also, I'll say this. We're going to miss you guys a ton over the break. It's weird to be with you guys every week and then to not see you for a whole month. But if you get lonely, if you're need someone to talk to, of course, reach out to your small group leaders, but also our staff. Like, find me on Instagram, shoot me a text, whatever. We also want to be available to you guys in that way. So this last time we're going to sing, I didn't double check. Is this Noel? Okay. So it's a Christmas song, if you didn't know. But Noel means, from what I've found on the internet briefly, so I could be wrong, the internet's not always right. Noel means, it's like French for Christmas. Or it can mean like Christmas carol. It can also maybe mean birth. So essentially when you're singing this song, my invitation to you is it can be weird maybe to sing a song that you know in the context of singing it as a Christmas carol, to sing it as a worship song. I just want to invite us as literally, we're not even in December yet, so it feels kind of silly. But as we step into this season, to just let your heart be worshipful as we sing. Pay more attention to the words, and kind of just let the Holy Spirit be teaching you in this season. So that's what I got. Love you guys, and I'll pray us into worship. If you guys, might be easier, you can go ahead and stand with me. How about we do that?